Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast is Are You Looking for More Freedom? For me, this was never a big issue of mine until my husband left me. And as I spoke about before, after he left, I was very devastated. And he called me up a few weeks later to talk about selling the marital home. And I was not doing that well at the time. And the thought of losing my home and not having a place to raise my children was so devastating to me. And I was willing to do anything that I could to keep this home. It wasn't even something I was willing to entertain. And because of that, we shared money for a while. I shared money with my husband after he left me, and it was very difficult. I never knew what was going to happen next. He made more money than me. I knew that if we weren't sharing money at that moment, I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford things. And everybody around me was saying, what are you doing? You're not free. You're compromising yourself. You've lived your whole life teaching people and helping people and talking about maybe and uncertainty. And there I was. I was stuck because I needed things to be a certain way. I was stuck because I didn't want to leave the home where I raised my kids. And this went on for a while. And there were some days that I was really able to let go. I was able to be in maybe. I was able to find the joy, and I didn't think about it. But there were some days that I felt like I was trapped, that I couldn't be fully honest. I didn't know what was going to happen. And the worst part is that I felt at any moment I could lose my home. And one day I got like a flu or some kind of illness, and I was not able to eat for a couple of days. And you know, when you're sick and you can't eat, you start to feel really weak. And I got a text from my ex-husband, who was my husband at the time, and he wanted to make an investment in an asset that we owned. And I didn't want to do it. So I wrote back, I don't want to make this investment. And when I wrote that, he wrote me paragraph after paragraph about how he wanted to split the asset. He didn't want to be married anymore. He wanted to go to a mediator. He didn't care what I had to say. He was going to make the investment. And it went on and on and on. And probably because I was in such a weakened state, I just couldn't attach to it. I was in the state where I just wanted to feel better. I was quite aware that I just wanted to feel healthy, and everything seemed like it didn't matter as much. And I realized in that moment that I could live without my home. And in that moment of freedom, where I didn't let myself get trapped or hooked or stressed where things had to be a certain way, in that moment where I realized that I could live without this thing, I could once again be free. And that was the moment when I decided to split the assets, and I decided to get divorced. And I had already been working really hard on making more money, so I was making more than I had, but still not enough at the time. But I was like, okay, if I lose the home, I lose the home. I have my children, I'll figure it out, and I'd rather be free. I needed to express myself, I needed to be independent, and I chose that, and at that moment, my life changed. And it was not easy. It was a tough fight to get divorced, and I worked really hard to earn more money. And today I own my marital home. I have all the money I need. My life is abundant. And I'm not saying that it was an easy road, but what I'm saying is in that moment when I chose to let go, in that moment where I didn't need things to be a certain way, where I let go of the stress, I let go of the worry, and I chose freedom. My whole life changed. Again, sometimes we have to lose things and we don't get to keep certain things. But to live a life where things need to be a certain way for you to be okay, you're always going to be stressed because the outside world is always going to give and take. Things are always going to change. And if you need something more than your freedom, it's always going to be a struggle to get exactly where you need to be. And I know there are certain things that are too hard to give up in this lifetime. Certain attachments, and I get that. We have attachments to our children. We could have an attachment to a relationship or attachment to something that's so important to us, and nobody's asking you to give that up. What I'm asking you to do is look at the things in your life that are giving you the most pain. It could be a job, it could be a relationship, it could be an asset like a home, whatever it is that's causing a struggle every day, which is not letting you live your authentic life, that's not allowing you every day to take that deep breath and know that you are not controlled by the things outside of you. Look at them and spend some time thinking about perhaps you can let them go. And again, just because you let it go doesn't mean you lose it. I let go of my marital home the minute I agreed to separate the money. But within my freedom, I found my power and I ended up owning it. So just because you let it go, just because you say, I can live without this job, doesn't mean you're going to lose your job. It just means you're going to let go of your stress, because you're going to see, okay, I have a problem at work, or they're not happy with what I'm doing. Okay, if I lose this job, I will survive. You might not be happy about it. It might not be your preference, but if you're willing to lose it, then you're going to show up with all the power and with all your truth. And even if you act the same every day, you're going to be less worried and less fearful because you trust that you will be okay no matter what. When that becomes your life mantra and you believe it, everything changes. And then you're not afraid all the time. And then you're not stressed all the time. When something happens that feels a little threatening, you have more patience. You don't think the world's coming to an end. You have more courage to speak up because it's really important for you to be authentic, because you're not thinking about that you can't possibly lose this thing. And again, there are some things we are going to choose that are so important to us that we're going to stay hooked, and that's okay. But let's try to find as much freedom as we possibly can in this lifetime. There's nothing worse than needing something to be a certain way when you're losing it, or it's threatened, or things are unstable. When we let that go and we realize there are many ways to be okay, there are many possibilities and many opportunities. And again, even if it's not our preference, we could still make something beautiful and wonderful with our lives. And that is the experience I had when my husband left me. It was not my preference, but because I chose freedom, I found a way. I found a path to blessings and abundance and a new life. And the same goes for you. Don't let anything steal that freedom, because that freedom is your authentic right to be joyous every day, to express yourself every day, to not be stressed and to not be worried. Because remember that that's all coming from trying to control something you cannot control. Life is going to do what it does. Yes, we can make some choices, but there's so much that is beyond us. And sometimes we're just resisting what's already happening. And other times we could just do our best and the rest is going to play out. So why not be free? And why not trust that you will be okay no matter what? If you're so afraid of losing it, you can't really give it everything you got to keep it. And that goes for the job, the house, the relationship. We have to be willing to let it go, to be our most powerful self, to find our way. And sometimes it's best you keep things, sometimes it's not. And life is going to show us the way anyhow. The path reveals itself over time. Do not be afraid to live this beautiful life that you were given. Do not be afraid to use that beautiful voice you have to express your ideas. Don't be afraid to start that business, to go back to school, to find a new relationship and be your authentic self. That is your right. And the only reason we slow down is because we're afraid of change. We're afraid of uncertainty. But deep down, we all want to be free. That's the thing we want the most. We want to be free, we want to be seen, and we want to be loved. And you have the ability to have all those things. So I hope this podcast was helpful today. I hope you think about the things you believe you need to be okay. And know that there are so many things we can let go of and be more than okay. Because in that letting go, we will find our strength, we will find our power, and we also always have the possibility that maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe or Year Without Men, they're available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.